For our next lesson, we're going to be placing dimensions on the end table drawing. So go ahead and open up the Design CAD program by double-clicking on the shortcut, DC. When this opens, you're going to have the options here. If the table is not showing on the right, go ahead and look for it, Browse. You're going to select the drop-down menu, click on Homes folder, and find your folder within there. Now I don't have my folders located there, mine are located on my desktop. Under drafting files, yours should be in a folder such as IA grade 9, 10, 11, whichever grade you're doing this in. And open up your end table. Always open up the program first, and then from within the program, open up the drawing. So there's the end table that we drew. One of the most difficult things to dimensioning an end table or any drawing is setting up the dimensioning tool. Your dimensioning tool is to the left on this toolbar, and when I select it, a window pops up. There's a whole bunch of different options here: text, prefix, suffix, arrowhead, extension, and tolerancing. We don't really ever click this one. Clicking on text, I've already gone through and predetermined your sizes for you, but when you're determining your sizes, you're probably going to have to do a little bit of trial and error. So make sure yours is set up like this. Format, 1.5 inches. There's drop-down menus here. It's the second one. Precision, 0.01. There's a whole bunch of options. You want it 0.01. Horizontal position is center. Vertical position centered. Orientation normal. For now, dimension line with text. Later on, we're going to be using the add leader, but for now, dimension line with text. Text size is 0.3. Text offset 0. And that should be all you need. Save, close. Now go into prefix and suffix. That's places information ahead or behind your number. In this case, I just want to put in inches here, so that's shift and the quotation marks. Press save, close. Arrowhead. I want you to choose this arrowhead. This one will work for you. It is the third one down, 1, 2, 3. And position is going to be inside. The dimensions are inside, if they fit, of the extension lines. Size of your arrowhead is 0.35. Save, close. Extension. Extension is the gap and the overshoot. So when I'm drawing a dimension, let's draw one here. Let's zoom up a bit or scroll up, and let's just draw a dimension here. This is my gap and my overshoot. So this is my gap in between my extension line and my object line, and this is my overshoot. That is not good. Let's change that. Extension 0.3 is good, but my gap should also be 0.3. Save, close. Okay, so let's see. I'll delete this. It's nice to go ahead and draw some dimensions, and then that way you can see if it's going to work for you, and that's good. So if I was to zoom into that, I have my gap and my overshoot. This is overshooting the arrowhead, 0.3, and this whole line is called my extension line, and this line here is called my dimension line because it houses the dimension. Don't need that right now, so I'm going to get rid of it. Going back to my dimensions, I've clicked on all of these, I've checked them all. I think we're good to go. Make sure this says automatic. And we don't need to close that, but we can start dimensioning. We always start on the innermost parts to dimension and work our ways outwards. However, to select where we're going to place our dimensions, we're going to do this point right here. We're going to right click, And I can just randomly put this anywhere, but I want to put it in a specific location. I want to put it 1 inch away from my outermost part. So I'm going to go point relative. I'm going to the left, so that's negative 1 inch. Make sure this is on last point, and select OK. And there's your first dimension. Not a great example, so let's move on to another one. When I select this point, I want to measure this rail from this point to this point. However, I'll zoom into here for this. If I dimension from this point to this point, and I can just snap to this now, it'll be in line that way. See what happens? I have no gap because my gap is here, and then you can't actually see it. So I'm going to Control Z that. When I dimension this, I want to take in dimension from this point, right click, to this point, right click, and I'm going to pull this out. And again, I'm going to just right click here. It's simpler than putting in a point relative. Now what happens now is this gap is good, but I'm dimensioning through an object line, which is kind of a no-no. So right here, this is not good. It's giving me the 0.3 gap from my point here to here. So I want to consider this. Whenever I can fix that, I want to fix that. In this case, I can fix that. So I'm going to change my gap. I'm going to add this here. So if I look on my drawing, that was 1.5. This should be 1/2 inch from here to here. So I want to add 0.5 to 0.3 for my gap. So we'll just click on this somehow. Come on. There we go. Delete it. And do this again. Except this time I'm going to change my extension, my gap, to 0.8. Save. Close. Right click on this point. Right click on this point. And right click on this point to line them up. There we go. Now we're maintaining our 0.3 gap throughout the drawing. Let's zoom back out. We've got two nice dimensions. Now we want to have a dimension from here all the way to here. Get that dimensioning tool. Everything is set up because I'm clicking from this point, so it'll maintain that 0.8 gap to this point. I don't have to do point relative, so I'm just going to right click to this and everything lines up nicely. I need to know also how wide this is, and I need to know how wide this is. So sometimes when we get into there, it will clutter it up quite a bit. So let's see what it's gonna look like when I dimension everything. Maybe I have to move something to the other side. Now right click here. If I right click here, that's gonna affect my gap. That's not gonna work too well. So if I right click here and right click here, you can see that this gap is in here. Plus it does this. So let's undo that. Let's not do that one just yet. Let's do this one from top to bottom. Pull that out and right click. So that's nice and neat and tidy. If I add another dimension in there, it's going to cause me trouble. So let's not. Let's put that dimension on the other side. We're going to put that dimension over here. And we can do that. We can do that now. We'll zoom into there, just like that. And again, if I right click here and I right click here, I want to make sure that my gap is 0.3 past my outermost line. So I have to add 1/2 inch and 1/2 inch, which is 1, and 0.3. So now my gap is 1.3. Save and close. Right click. Oh, that's not what I'm doing here. Right click, and you can see there that my gap is good. And I want to go point relative. I want to be 1 inch past this outermost line. So to go 1 inch past, I have to add 1 inch, 1/2 inch, and 1/2 inch. So let's try that. Point relative, 2 inches to the right. See what that looks like. Okay, I think that looks good. I can do a rough measurement with this tool. From here, just a rough measurement. This should be about 1, and it is good. Fit to window. And there you have it. Now let's do a dimension of the leg from here all the way down to here. Get your dimensioning tool. When I do the leg, when I dimension the leg, I don't want to go from this point. I want to go from the outermost point to the outermost point. And what you're going to notice is on the bottom there's that big gap. So before I click anything here, what I'm going to do is go back into extension, change my gap to 0.3. So you can do that on the fly as you're dimensioning, save and close. Now that's better, that's what I want. Now, I want this space, so I'm just going to manually put this down with my left click. I want this spaced 1 inches away, and I want this 2 inches away from this point. Okay, so let's point relative this. Let's place it with point relative, right click, and let's try point relative, quick key, -2, and see what happens. Now, -2, it went -2 from, I believe, from this point here. So in this case, we could do the math and figure out exactly how far and where we want it, but this is currently incorrect because that's not where I want to place it. The other thing we can do is, in some cases, we can eyeball it. And this is going to be a case where we're just going to take and actually rather than, yeah, eyeballing it, that's going to work. Right click, wrong place, press escape. Right click, and pull this so that it's approximately 1 inch from the previous dimension, so that this dimension is even to this dimension. So those are your vertical dimensions. Now I'm going to go up to the top and dimension the top. I always dimension smallest first, so I'm going to dimension from here to here. The thickness of this is 0.75, so doing some math, and we can probably do that right in the tool. So we're going to go change our gap again. That's the one we're always changing. I want to add, so I'm going to put a plus behind this. I want to add that 0.75. 0.75. Let's see if it does the math. Let's just click up here. Yeah, it did. It went 1.05. So save, close. Now, right click, and I want to place this 1 inch away. So I know that it's going to be, to place it 1 inch away, I have to add 1 and 0.75. So point relative, tab on the y-axis, 1.75. That will add that thickness of the top, and it'll place my dimension line 1 inch from the top of the object line. I'm going to do the exact same thing for the next one. I'm going to right click and right click, but I don't want it 1.75. I want it 2.75. So point relative, tab takes me to dy, 2.75. There you go, nice and even. And again for the last one, we're going to go right click, and you guessed it, point relative, 3.75 on the y-axis. And there you go. That does not look even for some reason. I wonder why. Oh, so we have some issues here. I am dimensioning from the wrong place. So this is right, I'm dimensioning from here to here. However, my gap should be 0.3, and it's not 3.75 anymore because I don't have to account for this. Okay? If I didn't want to change anything, if I click from this point to this point, it's going to work just fine. So let's do that so we don't have to change any numbers at this point. So let's take the dimension tool, right click, see how that's working for us? And now we can do the exact same thing, 3.75, enter. And that gives us even 1 inch separation between our dimension line. The last thing we really need to know is how far this is over here. So if it's too cluttered on this side, we try to always dimension on the same side, but if it's too cluttered, we're going to put it over here. So dimension tool, right click, And point relative, we're going down on the y, so tab takes us to y, negative 1, enter, and it puts this in right here, and it also is wrong, the gap is wrong because we didn't change that. So let's delete that and change our gap to 0.3. Under extension, 0.3. Save, close. Right click, that's looking better. Point relative, that's set already at negative 1. Enter. Zoom to fit to window. And I'm going to save this as, so File, Save As. Again, under your Homes folder, I'm under the desktop, and I have the drafting files. So go find and locate your file. And I'm just going to put end table dimensioned. Save. And that's the end of that lesson.